Welcome to US Secret Agenda YouTube channel. As the conflict in Ukraine continues, the tension between Russia and NATO is increasing with each passing minute. NATO does not remain unanswered in the face of the huge army that Russia has deployed in the region. British C-17 British Royal Air Force C-17 cargo planes have been sending troops and advanced equipment to Ukraine continuously for 4 days. After the British Defence Minister's statement on Monday, British shipments started to be made to Ukraine without wasting any time against the fear of a possible Russian invasion. With its last shipment, the United Kingdom sent 30 elite British Special Forces troops and 2,000 anti-tank missile systems to the region today. While these are the weapon and soldier figures announced in the shipments that have been going on for about 4 days, it is also reported that there is a very serious military force that has not been disclosed and has been dispatched. The United Kingdom, which carried out a large shipment of anti-tank missiles against hundreds of tanks that Russia has piled up in the region, said that this shipment was purely for defensive purposes and Russia should not worry about this shipment. But Russia shows serious reaction to the British on this issue. Russian intelligence states that the shipments pose a great danger on the Russian border. It is stated that the United Kingdom has reached a very serious military power in Ukraine as a result of this shipment, while a British force that can take action against Russia has gathered at the border. The NLAW, also known as the Main Battle Tank and Light Anti-Tank Weapon, MBT-LA, is a single-shot infantry anti-tank system consisting of a disposable launcher preloaded with a single guided missile. The weapon can be fired in 2 distinct modes, direct attack and top attack, in which the NLAW's munition is set to detonate above a tank where the armor is typically weakest. Regardless, guided anti-tank weapons have long been viewed as an important equalizer for the Ukrainian military in any future large-scale conflict with the Russians, who have a general superiority in quantity and, in some ways, quality, including when it comes to tanks and other heavy armored vehicles. They have also been presented as a deterrent against future Russian aggression for many of the same general reasons. In his remarks to Parliament, UK Defence Secretary Wallace specifically mentioned tanks and armoured fighting vehicles, as well as rocket artillery systems and short-range ballistic missiles, as among the threats that Russia has arrayed along Ukraine's borders in recent months. The Kremlin has deployed tens of thousands of troops to these same areas along with this materiel. Besides, NATO is not sitting idle in Ukraine besides this support. The Ukrainian armed forces deployed 8 MLRS, Smerch, and Hurricane missiles in Donbass today. It is thought that these weapons have a very serious destructive power and will be used against DPR and LPR militias in the region. However, given the information provided, there is a very serious risk that the armed forces of Ukraine could strike at the deployment sites of military equipment of the DPR and LPR militia, since the latter was discovered by American and British military reconnaissance aircraft, which over the past month almost daily fly over the Donbass. One multiple-launch rocket system, Smerch, can cover an area of almost 1,000 square kilometers in one gulp. In the event of a large-scale strike by the armed forces of Ukraine, this can lead to colossal destruction and losses. The Russian Panzer S air defense missile systems or the Mercury systems could well repel the attacks of the MLRS in service with the armed forces of Ukraine. However, such weapons are not in service with the self-proclaimed republics. There was only one problem with this shipment from the UK. That is, Germany closed its airspace to British military aircraft. With this move, Germany turned its back on NATO and winked at Russia. However, despite the confirmation by the defense ministers of the two countries that there was no such obstacle between Germany and the United Kingdom, British C-17s went to Ukraine over the Baltic airspace. This left a serious question mark in minds. The relations between Germany and Russia are a bit complicated. The two countries, which improved their relations especially after the Second World War, strengthened their relations with the Gazprom project partnership they made last year. Yesterday, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. While the result of this meeting has not been shared with the public yet, it is thought that the meeting was entirely about Germany's blocking of the shipments. British Ukraine was to provide military support to Ukraine. In the statements underlining that the Russians should not have any concerns, Putin was also intimidated to limit his wishes. At the same time, the fact that there is no attack restriction on the use of more than 2,000 main battle tanks and light anti-tank weapons, MBT law, donated to Ukraine and that these weapons take their place on the front line immediately confirms the extent of the measures taken by the United Kingdom against Russia and that they will be used for offensive purposes. When we look at the biggest military operation move of the United Kingdom against Russia recently, the members of the Ranger Regiment, part of the Army's newly formed Special Operations Brigade, flew out on military planes that also airlifted a total of some 2,000 anti-tank missile launchers to the country during the course of this week. British surveillance aircraft have also been spotted as part of a quiet but notable buildup of support to Ukraine's military by the UK. Open-source flight tracking software has plotted Royal Air Force C-17 transport aircraft flying back and forth between the UK and Ukraine. British reconnaissance aircraft have also been seen as part of a quiet but visible buildup of British support for Ukraine's armed forces. The data that the UK transferred a large number of anti-tank systems to the armed forces of Ukraine were announced by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Experts note that, given the current situation, a very serious escalation is being prepared in Donbass. And, apparently, it can happen within the next few weeks. At the same time, it is noteworthy that a number of sources reported that part of the complexes, after entering the warehouses, had already been transferred to the units of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Donbass, although today, due to the relatively small range of targets, they may well be considered useless, but at the same time, the armed forces of Ukraine can use them for operations. Today, in some sectors of the front, Ukrainian troops are only a few hundred meters from the positions of the militia. This makes it possible to use these complexes for striking. Moreover, it is very remarkable that London did not limit the use of these weapons only for protection. Also today, the Ukrainian military deployed 8 heavy multiple rocket launchers to the Donbass. This fact seems to confirm that Kiev is preparing for a full-scale armed conflict in the region. At the same time, given the lack of countermeasures in service with the DPR and LPR, the situation in the Donbass can be simply catastrophic. The movement of weapons came after Defense Secretary Ben Wallace announced to Parliament on Monday that Britain would increase its military support to Ukraine, which also included an increase in British military personnel on the ground as trainers. "We have taken the decision to supply Ukraine with light, anti-armor, defensive weapon systems," he said. A small number of UK personnel will also provide early-stage training for a short period of time, within the framework of Operation Orbital, before then returning to the UK. Operation Orbital is the name of a British training mission in Ukraine that was set up in 2015 following Russia's annexation of Crimea the previous year and backing of an insurgency in the east of the country. Meanwhile, Germany's Scholz, UK's Johnson discussed Ukraine border situation. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson discussed the situation on the Ukrainian border and agreed that further Russian military aggression against Ukraine must be averted, a German government spokesperson said on Friday. In a phone call on Thursday, Scholz and Johnson also agreed that it must be clear that Russia would have to face considerable costs in case of further aggression, the spokesperson added. But Russia viewed the move with suspicion. The Russian embassy to the UK posted on Twitter, "It is crystal clear that UK shipment of lethal weapons to Ukraine will only fuel the crisis." Officials in the United Kingdom and Germany have pushed back against speculation that there has been some kind of diplomatic disagreement between the two countries over a British airbridge operation that is delivering next-generation light anti-tank weapons, or NLAWs, to Ukraine. UK Royal Air Force C-17 cargo planes began flying sorties to Boryspil International Airport outside the Ukrainian capital Kiev yesterday, taking a route that appeared designed to avoid German airspace, after British authorities publicly announced the planned arms shipments. This all comes amid simmering concerns that Russia may be planning to launch a new, large-scale military intervention into Ukraine, fears that have sparked anew as Russian troops flood into neighboring Belarus ostensibly for SNAP exercises next month. German authorities have made clear that they did not ban the British flights from entering their airspace for any reason, and UK officials had not requested permission to send the C-17s over their country on the way to Ukraine in the first place. This was subsequently confirmed by the UK Ministry of Defence. The exact reason or reasons why all of the RAF C-17 flights to Ukraine that have been tracked online so far, 2 more of which occurred today, have taken the route that skirts Germany remains unclear. The flight path takes the jets out over the North Sea, before sending them east across Denmark and into the Baltic Sea. From there, they turn southeast and fly through Poland to Ukraine. The aircraft fly back to the United Kingdom on the same route, just in reverse. On Twitter, Andy Netherwood, a former RAF C-17 pilot, suggested favorable winds or other weather, as well as a possible desire to avoid having to go through entirely normal procedures to secure approval to fly planeloads of munitions across Germany, might be factors. There also remains the possibility that British and German authorities came to an understanding of some kind before the flights even began about not using the latter country's airspace for these flights over diplomatic sensitivities. The current German government has a complex relationship with Russia, most notably over an increasingly controversial gas pipeline project, called Nord Stream 2, which is now delayed ostensibly over administrative issues. German officials have faced growing pressure to at least threaten to scrap the project entirely if the Kremlin launches a new invasion of Ukraine. Looking at the winds, they did favor a northerly route via Denmark last night, so this could easily be the explanation. Personally, I have never experienced any problems with German diplomatic clearance. Regardless, the RAF airbridge to Ukraine appears to be continuing steadily into its second day. We have taken the decision to supply Ukraine with light, anti-armor, defensive weapon systems, UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace told members of the country's parliament yesterday. A small number of UK personnel will also provide early-stage training for a short period of time, within the framework of Operation Orbital, before then returning to the United Kingdom. Operational Orbital is the official name of the British military's security assistance mission in Ukraine, which began in 2015 in the aftermath of Russia's seizure of the Crimea region and the Kremlin's subsequent active support for ostensibly local, separatists, fighting against the government in Kiev. Let me be clear. This support is for short-range, and clearly defensive weapons capabilities. They are not strategic weapons and pose no threat to Russia, Wallace continued. They are to use in self-defense, and the UK personnel providing the early-stage training will return to the United Kingdom after completing it. As for what the C-17s are carrying, British authorities did not specify what anti-armor weapons they are supplying to the Ukrainian military. It has since been confirmed by Ukrainian officials that aircraft are carrying loads of next-generation light anti-tank weapons, NLAW, taken from British stocks.